Welcome to the PNOE podcast. Today I'm interviewing John Phelan. John, for the purposes of our audiences, can you describe your background, your education?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. So cheers for having me on. I'm a physiotherapist by trade with a background in nutritional science, so a bachelor's in nutrition, way back finishing up in 2004. And I was just thinking there at the time, it wasn't very high on the agenda of the Irish population to think about their nutrition. So I sort of moved into physiotherapy and kind of found my way towards real musculoskeletal physiotherapy in particular. And that brings you up to like 2010, 11, 12, working in the NHS in Scotland. And always had it in my mind I wanted to own or run a practice, a private practice. So I got a little bit of experience in Edinburgh, and then I was invited to a bike fitting webinar, or not a webinar, because back then you could attend things. So I was invited to a bike fitting event, went along, really grabbed my attention. So I said, yeah, I got to set up a website here so that when I go home to Ireland, which was kind of February 2016, I will hit the ground running. And that's what I did. I've been kind of running a physio-led bike fitting service the last 5 years, and along with like a physiotherapy service. So then I guess that's your background in what I do. Could go on longer, but
there's quite a few physios doing bike fitting. I think they do a great job because they have that a different view towards bike fitting. It's not all about making them the most aerodynamic, but there's the mix of bringing on injuries or making them inefficient in their systems as well.
Yeah, like it's very popular in Australia, and that happened to be the instructor that I was working with to upskill, a man called Paul Visentini in Melbourne. And yeah, it's popular down there, and it's not common here in Ireland. So it's nice to fill that space here, especially in the south of Ireland, where I'm on my own really as a physio bike fitter. Like you said, you're using that the knowledge around the body, and not to just stick to numbers, because that can really put someone in trouble, if they have any limitations in their musculoskeletal system,
Absolutely. Now, we got to know each other in 2019. You purchased a PNOE metabolic analyzer in 2019. Why'd you buy it?
So, we already know I had a bike fitting service going. So I thought, what do cyclists really love? Like the numbers. And so I thought I could definitely see a fitness testing service fitting into what I was doing. And I was actually also teaming up with a sports nutritionist, someone who's really honing her skills. Like I tended to let that nutrition side of me maybe take a back seat. So she was a sports nutritionist, and we both talked about the idea of for her, she wanted more accurate metrics for her clients. So she was using formulas to come up with sort of calorie requirements. And so she thought, yeah, this device would really help my service, and then I would use it for my cyclists. That's why we got into it. Now, as it happens, she's pulled out because she's gone more online, and now I'm the sole user of the unit.
Excellent.
Happy days.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with using your PNOE device?
Yeah. What was it? Kind of mid-19. I was a sort of a newbie, definitely. I mean, I didn't hit the ground running in terms of PNOE, I must say. Like I was having, I just needed to learn what I had in my hands. There was a wee bit of clunkiness with the actual, how to use it at the time. But support were there always to kind of help me on. There was different ways of calibrating it, and I just think, like in hindsight, it was a bit tricky for me. But now, if you fast forward like 6 months, it's a fantastic piece of kit. Like it's running smoothly for me, and I use it in my fitness testing, but also in my nutritional consultations as well.
Well, that's great. And how do you use it in association with your nutrition side?
Simply the RMR measurement, Daniel, like just getting that accurate measurement on their caloric needs and also like their metabolic rate. You know, do they have a fast metabolism compared to their predicted norm, or are they maybe on the slow side? And that's where you can then target their nutrition and training plans around it.
Yeah, I think, also knowing getting an idea of their cellular health by looking at their carbohydrate and fat ratios.
Yeah, the ratio. Yeah, of course, because we know that uh, for successful weight loss, it would make sense to have a bit more of a fat burning um, physiology. For sustained weight loss. So that you see that on the test results, you'll see their ratio, and so you can then again you can tailor your advice around that to shift it if it needs to be shifted.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't realize that metabolic analysis can provide you a lot about their cellular health, give you an idea of, there's obviously specific training that goes with if the muscle metabolism is a limiter, there's specific training that you can apply. And between being able to look at their metabolic rate and their cellular health can drive both nutrition and exercise prescription.
Yeah, like if I was to do the resting metabolic rate, then combine that with a fitness test with this same nutrition client, then you're getting a lot of information. So like if they are taxing the system that is like maybe their high end sort of, they're not exactly using their lower fat burning systems, you're going to catch that in the fitness test, and then you can inform them. And then they really do find that interesting. They've been knocking their head off the wall for years trying to lose weight, and it's down to just the wrong approach.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. The purpose of testing is to determine what the issue is, so that you can apply the right input to cause changes in that limitation. Have you also noticed that if you pay attention to the respiratory data associated with the RMR, that you can see that connection between people with respiratory limitations affecting their metabolism?
I would, again, I'm not going to say I'm the exercise physiologist, so I'm catching up with your education actually that you're putting on the platform, which is fantastic. But what I do when I do an MR or more is I look to make sure that their volumes are sufficient enough for the test to be accurately analyzed, and that their breathing frequency is not like super low as if they're comatose or if they're rapidly anxious. So I just check for that. I wasn't aware that you could look at that for
actually
reasons.
Obviously your fat and carbohydrate burn can be affected by your breathing, and vice versa. If you have a metabolic disorder, or even if you're on a particular diet, like if you're on a keto diet.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You
mentioned that higher breathing frequency.
Respiratory rate. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Mainly because, of course, your breathing frequency will be driven to blow off carbon dioxide, and there's a higher level of carbon dioxide associated with the keto diet.
Yeah.
So it's really, like you said, you could be in this game for a very long period of time and not realize that you have even more information that you think you do.
Yeah, like I mean, that was a stressful first lockdown for me, trying to upskill here again. It's wonderful to have the opportunity, but to gather all this and go through the modules and then put it into practice. And I'm glad I have a science background, and I can cope, but it's there's a lot there, for sure.
Well, and we've kind of talked about how you're using PNOE for nutrition, but can you describe for our audience how you're using active tests for the testing of endurance athletes to identify physiological limitations?
Yeah, so basically, what's happening in Ireland this year, hopefully, is the Ironman, right? So we have our own event for Ironman. It's on in Cork as well, which is where I'm based. So I'm seeing a knock on from that. So I'm getting people coming to me for bike fitting who have entered this event, and then they see the gas analysis service. They're like, right, let's jump on there, and they know why they want it. And I'm seeing in this endurance, they're signing up for an endurance event, but what we see can be far from the what you would want to see for this type of event, for this long distance event. So that's what I'm doing. I'm testing these kind of athletes, and I'm seeing kind of the biggest one I'm seeing is that they're completely training in the wrong zone. So like you'll see the results will come back and it'll show like the zone 3 will be quite wide heart rate range and their zone 2 will be quite narrow. And as you said in your modules, that's a sure sign that they've been just spending too much time up in that higher zone and not enough down in the lower one. And this is because maybe they were not aware of it, or there's two lads in particular, they're twin brothers and they're both very similar. Like they both were kind of running fast 5Ks and they were kind of, if you ask them about their diet, it was quite carbohydrate heavy, and they were just, so they wanted this information so that they could prepare correctly for the Ironman. And they both showed that type of result, with the poor kind of low end metabolic efficiency, switching to carb very quickly, basically.
Yeah, it's amazing when you're doing like an active test itself, how you can identify the difference between a cardiovascular and a respiratory and a muscle metabolic issue. And like you said, the intensity of their training is probably the most important component of their exercise prescription, and that you can undo a lot of really good cellular health by training at the wrong intensities. And a lot of people train right in the middle. They'll be zone
Yeah,
3 and 4. They'll be missing the benefits, the physiological benefits, and the functional benefits of training in 5, and the physiological benefits of training in 2. And of
yeah,
course, it's all related to the structures within the muscle itself, like the mitochondria and the capillaries. They respond to zone 2 training if the intensity is correct. And a lot of people are working with
with
incorrect
watches,
zones.
and they're working with incorrect numbers and also with
Yeah,
watches. Yeah,
yeah, and that's the thing is a lot of the devices are devising zones based upon algorithms, and this is a true issue. And a lot of people don't realize that the most accurate zoning you can get is through metabolic analysis, because we can see where all the fuel systems change very
exactly. Yeah.
clearly.
I was thinking that myself, that even if you were to use a lactate test to figure your zones out, you're still not quite finding out the limitations at all. You're just getting what your lactate levels as you move up through the intensities.
Well, yeah, I mean, lactate is
It-
not a direct measure of anything.
it's more an assessment.
It's an indirect measure of something that they're looking for. And with metabolic analysis, what they're looking for is we can measure directly with metabolic analysis. There's no requirement to do lactate in combination.
Yes,
I did
yeah,
lactate testing for 8 years. I know it inside out, did thousands of tests, and it would add nothing to what I already have with the
exactly.
information
Yeah,
I get from metabolic analysis.
and
So
like,
you've given us a few ideas of what you've seen. As far as defining the limitations, have you seen cardiovascular versus respiratory versus metabolic limitations?
yeah, I'm seeing like not many on the cardiovascular side, apart from the few that will just have not a very good VO2 peak score.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be, then you'd recommend that they will improve their cardiovascular metric as they improve their correct training for that. But
Yep.
the respiratory stuff, really, I see like quite a lot in the tests that I've done, which is not huge numbers because, like I said, I'm really getting going in the last year, halfway through last year now, and the respiratory stuff, like especially when you, again, this is something that you would, the only way you'll pick this up is through gas analysis, as the listener probably guesses, because we're able to measure the volumes that they're breathing in, and also the rate of breathing. So I have a few that come to mind where like he was hyperventilating quite early in the test, even in zone 2 he was up around the mid 30s, and this guy's an ultra runner, so he can manage, but we're kind of figuring that he could be one. Then we've given the education around that, and then we're going to be retesting in the near future. the science behind that, if I'm right in saying, Daniel, will be like if you are breathing excessively for what you're doing, you can actually overwork the breathing muscle, like the diaphragm, and then you can cause what's called a metabolic reflex reaction, a kind of where the body will almost limit the blood flow focus to the leg muscles and instead kind of shunt it towards the breathing muscle. And then that way you have yourself a limitation to your performance.
Yeah, people don't realize what percentage of the population hyperventilates during activity, and that this has profound effects on the cardiovascular and the metabolic systems. It can make it difficult for the oxygen to offload off the hemoglobin, meaning that you're getting decreased delivery of oxygen to the muscles themselves. It can change the ability to deliver blood from the heart directly. And it can even lead to things like anxiety or poor decision making as far as the brain is concerned if you hyperventilate.
Yeah.
There's a ton of systems
Interesting.
affected by hyperventilation. Nobody pays any attention to it. But with our device, going in and tearing through the data, like you said, of the amount their tidal volume, the amount they're breathing per breath, and their breathing frequencies, we can truly see how the respiratory system is responding at different intensities.
And you have recommended sort of values as what you would expect to see, in around the different intensity levels. And if someone's way out of those levels of those recommendations, then you've got something to work with. In fact, you asked as well, like I wanted to bring up something personal because I've really sort of seen it myself. I think it's worthwhile sharing is the metabolic. So we talk about respiratory, but the metabolic side would be my own case. So like I tested myself back on it's like around the 10th of September last year. And up to that point, well, by the way, I've entered the half Ironman in Cork in August, right? So before that, I was sort of a middle distance adventure racer, and also only really had time with a toddler. She's 2.5 now, but like say when she was like, I was only going out for 5K runs. I didn't have a load of time. So that was me for like say all of 2019 and into 20. And then I tested myself, like I said, and we'll see like how the metabolic efficiency I didn't have. Like I was very much.
Why don't you, if you're comfortable with it, why don't you share with our audience your initial test results?
Oh yeah, no worries. I'll just hit that.
All right. So for the benefit of everyone, we'll try and explain a little bit of what's going on here. So this is what we refer to as a ramp test. You can see the increases there's a 3-minute warm up where Jonah's pointing.
Yeah, that's
5. You'll see every 1 minute an increased intensity. And you can see this is a treadmill test. So you'll see speeds being demonstrated at each of the levels. In addition to that, on the screen is heart rate.
Green line.
You'll see, again, the speeds are in the steps themselves. And you'll see in red is his fat. And
well, I've got it like fat is like dark green.
I apologize. I am colorblind.
Oh, right. I maybe I'll take over from here, Daniel.
Yeah.
So the dark green line is my is a line that's kind of showing how much my fatty acid oxidation, or how the fatty acids that I'm using to fuel my run. And then the light blue is my carbohydrate usage as a fuel.
So you can see when we look at people, what we're looking for is a late activation of carbohydrate, which indicates, if you're firing carbohydrates up early, and I'm going to get a bit technical here, you're moving from the aerobic system to more into the glycolytic system, moving towards anaerobic, which is fueled mainly by carbohydrate. Whereas if you look at the fat, it's mainly fueled through the aerobic system. And both are oxygen dependent. And we go into this a lot more in the certification program.
Yeah.
PNOE.
I know where you stand on that. Yeah.
But you can see even at a low intensity, so 5.1, that's kilometers an hour, correct?
Yeah, kilometers an hour. Yeah, that's my warm up.
With a heart rate of
Like should be around 90, around
around
late 90, 100.
around 100 beats, that John has already activated carbohydrate, and this is a strong indication of what's happening at his cells. So his muscle metabolism, it has a poor ability to burn fat.
Yeah.
And this will be related to the number of mitochondria or the number of capillaries available in the muscle. But it also is a strong indication of past training. You can
Yeah.
you can always dissect people's last 3 to 6 months of training by looking at the results on metabolic analysis.
And that's why I gave my intro there. Yeah, that I was not into I wasn't into fun runs. I was into hard, like, and I live in a hilly area, and it was always just intense training sessions, basically.
Yeah, and what that does is it kills mitochondria and capillaries, and any kind of long, slow stuff is, and frankly, long, slow in zone 5 will increase capillarization and mitochondrial density, which will allow your muscle to burn fat better and for longer. And the other thing that we can note from this is, can you indicate the crossover for us?
Yeah, kind of.
So this would indicate the end of zone 2 for him, if this makes sense. Zone 2 is where you move from
their crossover to the peak.
Yeah, you move from free fatty acid burning over to glycogen or glycolysis, where carbohydrate becomes a priority fuel source for the energy system. So, what did you end up doing with this knowledge?
Right, like you said there, you know, if you want to improve your mitochondrial content density and capillaries, you want to work in accurate zone 2 with that zone 5 speckled, you know, intervals within that training session. So I took that on board. Like I basically did my zone 2, which was I have it here. It's like I try and keep my heart rate below 115. It was quite difficult. Yeah. Now, you know, the average might come out at about 120, and that was doing well, you know, after that kind of 45-minute run. And I will say that they were fasted runs as well, because this will also enhance this sort of push towards fat burning effectively. So I was doing a fasted run in the morning.
Great addition from a person with a background in nutrition. I love that. You know, just adjusting the availability of carbohydrates and fats will also have an effect on your fat burning ability. Well done.
Yeah, like it's not just the intensity, although the intensity is like the bigger factor here. So definitely was strict with my runs, and I kept it in I stayed away from the hills. I went down to the lake, kept it low level, or, you know, flat land, and so I also included the odd bike, but I was running around 2 to 3 times a week, and each run would have been at least over 45 minutes. So they weren't mega long, but they weren't less than 45. And they were like 9K, in around 8K. And I actually have interesting numbers that my pace is around 6.5 minutes for a kilometer, maybe even a little bit more than that. And I kept that going. And then I then looked at my scores. I got a retest basically on the 15th of January. So it was a good 9 weeks later. But I remember checking my data and metrics before that test, and I was up to like a 5-minute 55 per kilometer from like 6:35. So there was a nice little jump within that same heart rate range, like, you know, maybe 125 heart rate average. So I guess I was like, okay, what's going on? It'd be great to test it again and see what the score is.
And what'd you find on that? What'd you find on the retest about 9 weeks later?
The retest then, can you guys see that now, Daniel? Or maybe I need to.
Yeah.
You see a different screen?
Yep.
Oh, cool. So yeah, this is my retest. This was on the 15th of January. same sort of time of day, same sort of avoiding following the protocol of not messing and eat and drink, or having like an intense exercise session the day before. So I kept everything consistent. And there's the same protocol as well, by the way, the 5 kilometer per hour warm up, and you can just see a very different fat carbohydrate pattern.
Yeah,
Just allowing
absolutely.
you to keep going. Yeah, like the crossover happens much later. We even
At the beginning, there's not even the degree. You almost activated immediately before,
yeah
whereas what you do is your carbohydrate contribution is relatively small, whereas your fat
down here.
contribution is even higher than it was before. So the if you look at, these are kilocalories per minute. So
Yeah,
therefore, you can see that you've gone up to 8 kilocalories
8.
per minute, where you were lucky to hit 6 before. So you're pulling such a lot more energy is coming
Yeah,
from fat.
as opposed to like the 1.2 kilocalories per minute from the carbohydrate at the same intensity. Yeah, yeah.
And you've kept a mixed fuel source for a lot longer period before glucose becomes clearly the choice.
The main, in around like 12 kilometers per hour speed starts to split there. 155 heart rate, 153. Yeah,
Drop a little bit to your left, just right at the crossover.
there. Well,
Yeah, about 150.
yeah,
So, what's nice is, we're able to change your zone 2 significantly.
massive.
We're talking
20 was it?
about 20 plus beats to the right. And, the obvious prescription for you would be to continue establishing your base, what people refer to as your base, which is really your ability to burn fat effectively and efficiently, and keep you kind of, that 130 to 150
But
area,
yeah,
to be able to get you to continue to burn more fat, but even more importantly, drop the carbohydrate even further down.
yeah, like that's what I ended up doing. And my new zones is like 137 to 150. So for instance, the other couple of days ago, a 521 pace was
Wow.
still within now my new zone 2 of 141 average heart rate. So
Can I make a comment about this? Is where people who train on pace versus heart rate. This is a real problem for people, is the fact that your pace will change significantly in response to physiological changes. I'm a firm believer that anything in zone 1 to 3 has really very few functional benefits, but they have huge physiological benefits. So I think it's really important to use heart rate zones, especially for your medium to low intensity work. You may do wattage or speed intervals that have a functional basis. You want to increase your coordination, your turnover. You want to, if you're on a bike, you want to increase your ability to turn the pedals efficiently at 380 watts. You have a functional goal. Then training on watts or speed makes sense. But down here, when you're mainly interested in improving your physiology,
yeah,
using heart rate is extremely important.
and that's when you have a need for this. So this is what I'm finding. Like I had an athlete in, and he's a very proficient runner. He's new to the bike, and I got the luxury of testing him across both disciplines. And he doesn't have this poor low end metabolic issues like I did in when he's running, but he does when he's cycling, which I found really interesting. So I suppose he's new to those muscle groups, and he's going to follow his zone 2 more for his bike, but there's no requirement for him to really work in the low zones for his running.
Well, that's what's great when you're working with triathletes, is the fact is the limiter on the bike will be different than it is on the run. Your zones will be completely different, and what you're working on should be different in response to those limiters. And I always love comparing people's performance on the run versus on the bike. And there's some stuff that becomes very clear like you said, inefficiency will show
Yeah.
up is, a loss of the bottom and top end. But you can find people that are on the bike when they're seated on the bike and they have their hands on the bars, their respiratory system performs well. You get them upright and running, and they can't breathe well at all. And you
Yeah.
do not know that if you didn't test them on both. And therefore, your training approach would be completely different for both modalities.
Uh, I was actually at a talk before. Sebastian Weber, you know this man, he works with a lot of pro cyclists. Yeah, I was at one of his conferences, and he said it was an interesting point he made. He's like, if someone is trying to like get past these ceilings that they might have, like high end athletes, that they should try doing something that they're not experienced to it. So a cyclist could just go into a boat and start rowing, because that way they will actually try to push those limitations, because they're becoming inefficient. You get me? Just that was a good point.
Considered a type. Remember, I taught you guys about variability of training. The ability to look at metabolic analysis results and see areas of efficiency. And you can look at those areas of efficiency, and you know damn well that's where they're training. So
Yeah.
you pick on areas of inefficiency. They end up being just varying their program away from what they've been doing over the last 3 months. They've adapted to it.
Yeah.
But through metabolic analysis, you know that we can be very particular about exercise and nutrition prescription with the data from metabolic analysis.
That might be a nice, just to show the followers like that's a nice one to look at. Where I'm slipping up a little bit is this end stage. You could see this metric. You'll tell them more, but this is more like a VO2 over breathing frequency. So it would be sort of a metabolic efficiency metric.
Exactly. It's your ability to use oxygen per breath.
Per breath, yeah. And it's tagging along nicely, increasing, and then it does start to sort of drop. Would you say the more dramatic drop would be here?
No, because I mean, if you cared to create a line across it, using just a statistical model, it would basically be a straight line across there. But you're right. Above that, what's the heart rate above the final drop?
The final drop, sort of 178.
So all you have to do is be able to go, where does 178 correspond to your zones?
It's in my zone 5. Yeah.
Zone 5 intervals.
Yeah, keep doing them anyway. Yeah.
And what's great is zone 5 intervals will improve you functionally at that point, but will also increase mitochondrial density and capillarization to improve your bottom end.
Yeah.
What we might be picking up is, let's face it, what allows you to be efficient at the top end is your aerobic capacity, your ability to process the byproducts of zone 5 fuel source, whether it's phosphagen or CRP, and how well your aerobic system, and in particular your respiratory system, responds to the creation of those byproducts and tries to control you from becoming acidotic.
Yeah.
Well, the better that handles that situation, the more flat that line will stay. By training in that zone is the only way you're going to change it.
Yep. Exposure to your weaknesses.
Yep. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's excellent. It shows. I love it because it shows zoning, the importance of the accurate zoning, and it shows how clear it is to be able to prescribe the right exercise program and the changes over only 9 weeks. It'd be very interesting to look at another 8 to 12 weeks to see the changes in the zones. A lot of people don't realize that you can move zones by 15 or 20 beats in 8 to 10 weeks.
8 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I teach you guys is the fact of
retest.
If they've been training in the wrong zone, retest them in 8 to 10 weeks, and you're going to need to rezone because they're going to change drastically.
Yeah, I can see from experience. Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful, and so that's a good example of how you can use results to really streamline your training recommendations and nutrition recommendations to your athletes. Have you found?
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, so I was able to, so those twins kind of come to mind, the two guys doing the Ironman, and I was able to then look at that and say, right, lads, you're too keen to, they were just like me, basically. So we got to maybe looking at their macros across their day, and if they're doing this low carbohydrate. So I'm not I don't push the ketogenic diets, and I'm not like, two extremes. I'm just talking about, okay, maybe periodization. If you're having an easy day, then maybe let's look at maybe reduction in the carb content on those days. And so we've given sort of a guidance around that area. And then I guess when it comes to the day of the event, we can give actual nutritional um, advice on how much that they will require. We could probably do a test closest to the event, and they're almost near the event, and we could see then how many calories they're requiring at certain intensities, so they could
Yeah.
manage their nutrition plan that way. So it's a nice.
If they're going to split the race between zone 3 and zone 4, which a lot of people do, you can do a
And
caloric
endurance.
calculation and not
Yeah.
only know the number of calories that they're going to require, but also what's their splits of fat and carbohydrates so that you can fuel them as well.
Yeah. So you're saying what is their split? Or well, I'll know it, won't I?
Yeah, you'll know. Just be able to go
I'll
off
just look at the data.
the active
Take,
test.
yeah.
Yeah. So rate training and race planning for nutrition is really valuable from the active test. Whereas, as you know, with your nutrition background, how valuable you can't go on without knowing an accurate RMR, and also to be able to know how what fuels that they burn at rest. Those two pieces of information are vital.
Yeah. What I was thinking as well, I might come back to closer to that time, is that it might be better to put them through an endurance uh, gas analysis endurance test rather than a ramp,
Yep.
because I already have the influence, so that would be more appropriate for their event, I would think.
Yeah, that's what's great is sure we rely on ramp tests for considered
Yeah.
diagnostic for us to be able to identify certain numbers that we need to be able to zone or VO2 max for cardiovascular, respiratory, and metabolic fitness. But
Yeah.
when you get closer to a race, then doing an endurance protocol, um,
Yeah.
you just change, but you're looking for different information, which is great. I mean, part of the information you might be looking for is fuel. How am I going to fuel my person for this particular race? Well, you'll know how many kilocalories they're burning per minute at that intensity, and you'll know
Yeah.
the split of fat and carbs, so you can really put together an excellent nutrition plan.
Yeah.
So now we've kind of covered a lot of really great stuff, but going into the future, I'm really interested. How do you plan on using metabolic analysis to assist you with bike fitting?
Yeah. So I did hear about his name escapes me, but he's over in Colorado, and he's supposed to be doing it quite successfully. He's using his PNOE device with bike fitting. I think it was PNOE that gave me his name actually and said chase him up. So yeah, you can certainly use it. I suppose when I'm starting to see more and more of these triathletes coming in and they want to get into more aerodynamic positioning, and I'm trying to explain about the importance of power to aero trade-offs and crank lengths, but it's all good. But it might be just another thing to add where I could pop the kit on and see what their volumes are, how just track them in that position that they might want to use, and then we could say, okay, that position might feel good, but it's actually not giving you great metrics here, and I would kind of almost come to you then to see, where that, like you said you had some experience in that area. Is that, would you be looking for volumes? Are you looking for
Well, let's look at mechanical efficiency because cyclists love mechanical efficiency.
oh, mechanic? Yeah, of course. Yeah.
There's a myriad of ways of looking at it, right?
Yeah, you
There's
can.
the power to weight ratios, which you don't really need a device for. You just need a wattage meter. Um, they'll use things like FTP and other assessments like that. But really, on the nutrition side, you could do watts per kilocalorie. and
Okay.
look at
Yeah.
it. By all means, you could look at even watts to VO2 as a metric. Obviously, watts is the ultimate measure of the output.
Yeah.
What you want to do is throw in a couple of inputs and to be able to.
And there, that's accessible from the same platform. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. I haven't used this now. You see, I'm
Yeah,
just getting.
you can bring up. In fact, our mechanical efficiency score that they get on the reports has to do with watts per.
But that would be the new report, I think. What's it coming out?
That's the old one, but what we're adding to it is a delta, meaning that you can put a trend line. Because I want to know whether their efficiency drops at certain intensities with different fuel systems. So
Yeah.
Yet another really, you can't come up with a number and say that they're mechanically efficient. Where?
Yeah.
Is it at low intensities, medium intensities, medium high intensities, high intensities? There's some place they're going to be inefficient.
I heard, I just jogging through my memory, like something's coming up in my head saying, 60% of VO2 max can be seen as the most mechanically efficient in the cycling population. Is that?
Yeah,
it could be some research around it now.
It's a bit of math, and this is how they defend FTP and a bunch of other things. So
yeah,
be very careful when you're looking at when people present math as science. The fact is, you have the metrics of their physiology. They don't.
Yeah, like you said, they're more assessment.
They just have two things: wattage compared to watt, and we can see how the physiology responds at all levels. Some people will be more efficient at higher wattage, and some will be more efficient at lower wattage. Well, guess what? It could be the difference between a good track cyclist versus a good endurance cyclist. It could be just part of their makeup, of their distribution of slow and fast twitch fibers.
Yeah.
There's so much that goes into it. To generalize in that way, I don't find helpful. So, but that's so I think it's a great idea. Like you said, you don't want to put them into a position that's aerodynamically advantageous, but let's say all of a sudden you notice that they're starting to hyperventilate because they can't move the same volumes. You have to look at the exchange, over a 5-hour race, the diaphragm has to move a hell of a lot. And if you're going to make it more difficult, and if there's a respiratory limitation, it has effects on the brain, it has effects on the cardiovascular and the metabolic systems. Is that worth it?
Yeah. Is it worth it? Yeah, I know, yeah.
So I agree with you. I love the idea of looking at the effects on the physiological systems from different positions. One of the ideal things is to just test them first on their current setup, because you still need a baseline to determine with what you did made them better or worse.
Yeah.
And obviously, you need wattage outputs to find out whether
the trainer.
You have everything.
PNOE is a fantastic trainer. Yeah, it's it would need to be a big it would take longer, so it'd be a whole new service. But I'll get there. But right now I'm happy just using it with it.
Yeah, just getting the experience.
I'm happy using it,
knowing how to interpret the data and to apply the right training, and that's the goal of our certification program, is to ensure that our users just don't have a device that spits out numbers, but it actually leads to exercise and nutrition prescription that leads to results, and that's ideal. So what's in the future?
Yeah, I mean, at the start, well, like I want to get more knowledgeable in this area. It's fascinating, and it's just another more, not to get too pigeonholed as a bike fitter. I like this expansion. So for me, it's going to go into testing, more so into, I want to expand the nutritional service as well, help some weight loss clients. I got two in mind that have really found it fascinating and have had successful weight loss with the using the unit. And I don't think I couldn't have achieved that with them without it. For me as well, I'm focusing on the endurance athlete. I mentioned Ironman. So what I'm doing this year or last month is writing up a 6-part blog, kind of vlog series. And actually, I want to put this podcast in to the second one about the role of gas analysis in training for endurance events. So there's like 6 parts, and it's going out from my website to local tri clubs and helping their athletes just get ready for this Ironman. Hopefully we go ahead with it, but we have to believe that it's going ahead, in August. And what else am I at? I want to link up with coaches, actually. I just think that's a space there. I've got a meeting tomorrow with a local crowd down the road to see, can I offer the unit its usefulness to their members, That's a standalone sort of personal training gym. But coaches, I've got 2 particular lads who are happy to link up. I could name names. They're Donica Long, he's Fit for Long, and any of Adam Doyle, a friend of mine, he's down there, he's doing Endure to Perform. So they'd be very experienced in terms of coaching long distance athletes. So maybe that working with those lads and others to give them numbers that they can use with their plans, it could be a nice team,
Well, let's for our audience, how do they, let's give the name of your company and how to get a hold of you if they happen to be in the Cork area.
Yeah, if you're in the Cork area, it's funny, I got like a kind of a, what do you call it, split ego now. I've got 2 names. So the Bike Fit Physio, right? The Bike Fit Physio would be my specific market in terms of bike fitting, testing, and then I have my physio general practice is called Life Fit Physio. That's the thing I'm wearing, lifefitphysio.ie. So if they're on either of those, they're going to find me. My social media would be the Bike Fit Physio.
Excellent. Well, I think, I've had lots of chance to exchange with you. Your knowledge on nutrition and what you're learning through on the exercise side of the house.
Yeah,
your desire to learn.
Thanks.
You're doing extremely well, and you're just going to get better and better as you get more and more tests through. And I always like working with you, and I think where you're heading is the right direction. I think combining as a exercise physiologist and a sport physio and a strength conditioning coach, I think it's great to get a lot more physios involved in exercise physiology. I think we bring a really unique view on things.
You speak for both of us, with your background.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining me today and sharing your story about your company and actually your own personal story about identifying your limiter and applying the right training mechanism and seeing the changes in a matter of weeks.
Sweet.
Excellent. And hey, I want to see what happens after another 8 to 10 weeks of training in the right zones, the right intensities. And
I think eventually things will get tougher for me. This zone 2 is too long. You can't stay in that camp too long either.
Well, what's funny is, as I say, your job is to create a different limiter.
Yeah.
There's always a limiter, and your job is to move it. And but your performance goes up all the time, and it just gets harder and harder to find a limiter until you're doing nothing but functional training, which is that's your goal is maintaining your physiology while doing functional training. But everybody switches to functional training off the bat, and it's physiology before function. So
there you go.
All right. Well, thank you very much, John, for joining us, and I look forward to talking more.